Hello, everybody. Greetings from Washington. I'm delighted to be part of this informational program. I'm going to be talking mainly about the admission requirements to a U.S. law school. So you will see on your screen that all applicants, when you are applying to a law school in the U.S. for the Masters of Law, for the Legum Magister, the LLM, you have to meet certain standards to be considered eligible. So regardless of whether you're going to be doing an online LLM, an executive LLM, or doing an LLM in residence at a particular law school, keep in mind that admission requirements are highly selective and they are going to be based primarily on your prior legal studies. You are going to be applying to an accredited U.S. law school. At this time, we have over 200 law schools in the U.S. that are accredited by the American Bar Association, and therefore each of these schools has certain admission standards that you must meet in order to be considered for admission. Next slide. So in order to be considered for the LLM program, as you heard from my colleagues before, you heard about the MLS, you heard about JD, but the LLM is considered a post-JD program in the US. Keep in mind, as I mentioned before, that each law school has different criteria for admission, and therefore you should check with the law school that you're looking at to make sure that the degree that you have will be considered. Next slide. Now, for those applicants, if you have a Bachelor of Arts in Language or Literature or a Bachelor of Arts degree, Political Science or International, if you have that followed by a Master's in Law, in most instances it does not qualify an applicant for admission. Again, keep in mind that each law school has different admission criteria, and some law schools will consider a master's in law even though you don't have a first degree in law. So again, you should always check with a specific law school to see what requirements apply to you. For those students who are currently studying, that means you have not gotten your first degree in law, but that you will complete it prior to the start of your LLM. Law schools will consider you for admission, but you will be required to show that you have completed all the remaining coursework and that you have been awarded the degree in law. So before you matriculate, you will be asked to certify and present your final transcripts and copies of diploma saying that you have completed all the coursework and that you were granted the degree before you can start the LLM program. If you are not able to complete, for example, if you have certain requirements, you were writing a paper or a thesis, or there's one or two courses that are still pending, you would not be able to start the program immediately, and you would have to finish the first degree in law requirements before you could start an LLM in the US. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we have many, many law schools in the U.S., and we get hundreds of applications, if not thousands, for a limited number of slots in each program. Law schools do not have standard numbers for their LLM programs. It depends on the law school and what its LLM program is for, whether it's only a general, if it's an executive, if they have specialization. So you will find law schools have LLM programs with as few as 20 students, and you will find law schools that have LLM programs that take 400 to 500 students each year. So again, it depends on the law school. However, most of the admission requirements are standard, and I'm going to go through a little bit about the application process, but you'll hear from my colleague in a few minutes on the detailed application requirements. First of all, in order to be admitted into an LLM program, all law schools are going to look at strong academic and personal credentials. They're going to be looking at students who are coming right out of law school, as I mentioned earlier, to applicants who are in-house counsels, academics, research scholars, first-year associates, government officials. It's an extremely varied mix of applicants for all law schools. In some instances, you will find that there are law schools in the U.S. that do require candidates to have some sort of work experience. This means work experience after completion of your law degree. This does not mean internships that you undertake while you're in law school. There are some law schools that will require candidates to have a minimum of 1 to 5 years of work experience. Again, check with the law school that you're looking at to see if they require this. Obviously, for any admission committee, the most important thing is the academic qualification of the candidate. So close attention is paid to the grades of the applicant. Now, keep in mind that candidates are coming from different educational systems, from different legal systems. So it is very hard for a U.S. law school to judge an applicant in comparison to a U.S. student or in comparison to a student from another country. So you are going to find that most law schools, because we get asked this question all the time, do you have a numerical cutoff for a grade, or do you have a grade equivalent that compares to a US A, B, or C grade? Most law schools do not. You will be gauged on how well you have done in your own system, in your own educational system, and how well you compare to other Spanish applicants. So you're going to be looking, law schools are going to be looking at candidates who are in the top 5, 10 to 20% of their graduating class. But they will also, for example, look very, very carefully at your grades in a certain subject area. For example, if you have indicated that you're interested in international law and you're applying to an LLM in international and comparative law, the admissions committee is going to look at your overall transcript, but they will look very closely at the courses, at the subjects that you have studied that come under international law heading, and see how well you have done in those subjects. So this is all part of what we call the holistic review of the application. Not only do we look at the grades, but we're looking very closely at the personal statement and the letters of recommendation. Letters of recommendation carry enormous weight in each admission committee's evaluation, because we want to see and find that candidates who are going to be coming into the law school are going to contribute not only to the intellectual life of the law school, as in terms of how engaged you are in the classroom, but also outside of the classroom. This is very important for any admissions committee. They want to get a student who is going to be academically sound, who's going to have the maturity, the intellectual capacity, and also be socially engaged within the life of the law school. Next slide. So this is very briefly in terms of application requirements. All law schools will allow you to either apply through LSAC, but there are certain law schools that will also allow you to apply directly through their own website or by mailing a hard copy. You will see on your screen the typical requirements. I'm not going to go through those because my colleague will be going through those in a little while. But these are pretty much the standard admission requirements, eligibility requirements for all law schools. Next slide. So you can apply again through the LSAC service, and then you will find that you can submit all your transcripts and documents and other information that is required by the law school to LSAC. If you're submitting them through the credential assembly service, then you will also be able to authenticate the documents, and then LSAC takes care of distributing all of these documents to the law schools that you're applying to. Next slide. Part of the admission requirements for any law school is proof of English proficiency. This is considered very heavily as part of the admission requirements. You have to prove some sort of English proficiency if you received your law degree in a language that is not English, where the medium of instruction was not English. Then you must submit a proof of English proficiency, either in terms of a TOEFL or an IELTS score. The preferred test for most of the law schools these days is the test of English as a foreign language, the TOEFL. And you're going to find TOEFL centers all over Spain and most of the major cities. These days, however, a lot of law schools also accept the IELTS. There are some law schools that will also accept different English language scores, such as the Cambridge exam. Again, do your homework. Go back to the law school that you're looking at and see what English proficiency they will accept. Keep in mind that the minimum score requirement for English proficiency also varies widely from each school. There are certain schools that look at TOEFLs from 80 and above. Others look at TOEFL scores of 100 and above. Make sure you check with the law school to see what their minimum requirement is and what type of test they prefer. Now, if you happen not to meet the required score, call or email the admissions officer and see if they offer conditional admission. You can also request an interview by Skype, with an alum, by telephone, or you can retake the TOEFL and submit new scores if you deem it necessary. Next slide. A little bit about George Washington Law. We are in Washington, D.C., in the nation's capital, and we offer a general LLM and 11 specializations that you see on the screen. All of these specializations meet the New York Bar requirements, and we also permit you to change your specialization within the first 2 weeks of the semester. So if you come in thinking you may want to do international comparative law, but then you find that the business and finance program covers a lot of the international business courses and you wish to switch, within the first 2 weeks you are permitted to do so. The next slide, please. This is the contact information. Please feel free to call. We have live chat weekdays during our office hours, or you can email me directly and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you may have.